Well, hello. The music did go down and the mics did come on. Thank you. That was the signal. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the All In panel. We're excited that you're all here. We have a distinguished group of panelists. Let me tell you who I am first, and then they're going to give you a little bit of introduction on themselves. And then I'm going to ask them questions. We'll go back and forth a little bit, and then we want to interact with you. So we'd like to have time from you to ask them questions as well, because they've sort of been through a little bit of this journey, and we're hoping that there could be some exchange and conversation. And if not, I'm known to be able to ask a question every now and then. So I'm Frank DiGiammarino. I lead our U.S. state and local government practice for the Worldwide Public Sector Group in Amazon Web Services. And really excited to be here today and kick off this panel. So I'm going to start with Bob at the end, so we have to hand him the mic. We've got handhelds that are going between us here. And go ahead, Bob.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Bob Michelli, and I'm a Senior Enterprise Manager for King County. For those who are not familiar with King County, it's King County, Washington, which is where AWS lives, actually. So it's hometown for AWS, right? There's about 2 million people that live in King County. It's the 13th most populous county in the U.S. My role in King County is to provide data center services, infrastructure services, and platform services. So I'm responsible for the entire infrastructure stack, and that's what I do for the county.
Hi guys, I'm Vijay. I'm from the National Democratic Institute. Probably a little confusing based on the name, but we're not national and we're not the Democratic Party. So don't ask me about that one. We operate in 60 countries. We're nonpartisan, we promote democratic institutions and strengthen them. As in my role as a CIO, I manage 4 areas: IT operations and support, security, product development, and IT consulting for our partners. We're in 60 countries and serve hundreds of partners. We're on the other end of going all in Amazon, as in the extreme end. All of our apps are in Amazon. We've been on this journey for a few years now, and we've learned a lot. I'm happy to share my experiences. I'm an advocate of Amazon. I can't even begin to explain how important Amazon's been for us. My particular background is in security, IT assessments, audits, and in particular, advanced persistent threats. I'm on DC's CISO Roundtable and a few other security groups. So if you guys have any questions pertinent to security, that's also useful for me.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mike Chappell from the University of Notre Dame, and I'm the Senior Director for IT Service Delivery there. We've been on our Amazon journey for about 4 years now, and it started with just a few little pilot projects, and we were not at all thinking. If you had told me 4 years ago I'd be sitting on a panel about all-in cloud strategy, I'd tell you were crazy, because it wasn't something we were thinking about, but yet here I am sitting here today. We're now about a year into our cloud-first journey, and we've moved about a third of our services from on-premise to the cloud. And the interesting thing for me is we're an almost 175-year-old organization. So to say we were set in our ways is probably an understatement. Tradition means something very special on our campus, and we had a tradition of legacy IT. And we have people on our team who were the ones who tended the mainframe decades ago, and they were still there today. So one of the things that we've learned along the way, and I'm really interested to talk a little more about this afternoon with you, is the culture change that's needed to bring people along on that cloud journey, and really transforming an organization, and not only convincing people that the technology is the right way to go, but winning over the hearts and minds of a team and completely changing direction. So look forward to chatting with you a little more about that.
Hi everyone, my name is Eric Geiger. I'm the Managing Director for the Federal Home Loan Bank of Chicago. We're a little bit younger. We're only about 80 years old. Yeah, just a small child. Our our journey started out somewhat similarly in that we had an application that did all of our, managed our portfolio and did all of its analytics. And that really meets the high performance computing model. A lot of infrastructure, working very hard for a short period of time and then sort of sitting idle for a period of time. And it's very expensive. And we used Amazon as a way to try to lower that cost, and it was extremely successful. And we did that in about 2011, 2012. And because of that success, we just started doing more and more and more. And over the course of about 3.5 years or so, we ultimately had about 30% or so of our infrastructure in Amazon. And we hit a point where we had to make a decision. We had a data center that was going away and a partner that was going away, and we needed to go somewhere. And because of all the success that we had, we thought, you know what, we'll go all in. And so at the beginning of this year, actually, in April of this year, we finished the project moving all of our infrastructure into Amazon. So we're 100% there, and we have been for some time now, about 6 months, and it's been very successful. So I think we might have some good stories to share in that space.
Hello, my name is Roland Oberdorfer. I'm with Singapore Post e-commerce, and Singapore Post e-commerce is a subsidiary of Singapore Post. So they deliver the mail in all of Singapore. And my role there is chief architect, and our journey started a couple of years ago when the CEO decided that the mail business is dying and they have to do something in addition to that. So we started the subsidiary, SP Commerce, and the goal was to do mono-brand hosting in Asia. And we started with our first customer, which is Adidas, and launched that store, like Andy said this morning in the keynote, within 3 months. We did that not within the Sing Post data centers, but we chose actually to go on the cloud right away, since that's a more scalable model, because we didn't want to only get our first client, we wanted to get many more clients, which we in the meantime did. And so that's where we are at this point. So we have several mono-brand customers up and running in Singapore, and we do the entire e-commerce service offering, from website development to customer service to logistics and fulfillment for customers in Asia Pacific.
And so let's stay on you, and then we'll push this down the chain here. Some key takeaways, some key lessons learned, things you might have had that people had told you ahead of time, or tidbits of advice on your journey.
Well, our journey was actually fairly straightforward. We started with a small environment, kind of, as a proof of concept. When we looked at options, and we chose AWS right away. We have many applications that are on a LAMP stack. So we started with that small environment, and then we had to kind of figure out how big our production environment should be. And for that, we tried to get traffic numbers, from similar assets that Adidas had in other countries where they already had an established presence, but it's still kind of, a guess of how big your environment should be. So, once you're up and running, you have to keep a close look at the utilization, and then kind of work in real time to see how you want to do that. Back then, we didn't have auto-scaling in place, so we had to kind of still.
Right.
In the meantime, there are several things that are now much better, like the VPC, in terms of for every customer, we usually launch an entire new environment, right? So there's always like a separate environment within Amazon with its own VPC, and then auto-scaling, of course, helped us a lot, especially our business is very seasonal, right? So there's a lot of traffic that comes during the holidays. And in the past, we had to, in my previous role, we always had to plan for that, and we had to buy infrastructure. I think last year, my boss, Marcelo, mentioned that we had superdomes at one point in time, and we had to plan for that we had the capacity in place for the holiday season. But that capacity had to stay the whole year, right? You couldn't just get rid of it again. But with auto-scaling, you can ramp up your capacity, and then you can bring it back down. And that's actually a significant difference, right? For the holiday season, sometimes it's up to like 70% that you have to add in terms of
Right.
infrastructure.
Right. Great. Eric?
So I think there are a couple of things or takeaways that we would have. You know, I think one of the first ones, and this actually it's come up a couple of other times in some other conversations, is that if you know that your path is ultimately moving a lot into Amazon, I would really focus on your networking right off the bat, and specifically on your direct connection right off the bat. You know, connecting to Amazon through a VPN is fine, and it works great, particularly if you're just doing development. But if you've got offices in Chicago and you're connecting to Virginia and you have applications in both locations, you know, that latency ultimately can become frustrating. And one of the big things, which I'm sure we'll hear a little more about, is user buy-in is very important. And without that direct connect, that latency can be a little obnoxious and your users can get a bit frustrated on it. So I would really make sure, you know, starting out, that you pay a lot of attention to that network component. You know, EC2, all of those Amazon components, those will all come together, you know, fairly easily. But how you get there is a big part of it. And to help with that, the other thing I would recommend is, if you're really doing something like all-in, find a good partner. You know, I'm sure you all have skilled, competent, you know, great technical folks, but working with a good partner is extremely important. We did, and I wish we'd have started with them a couple of months earlier than we had started with them, because they brought some knowledge to the table around not just things like networking, but around VPC design and a number of the other things, you know, around security design, and those proved to be very helpful, and we could have saved a lot of time if we'd have started that earlier in the process.
I couldn't agree more with taking the time to really carefully and thoughtfully design your network infrastructure. And actually, we thought it was so important, we did it 4 different times. but seriously, we did do that. After we went through some pilot projects and we were getting serious about this, we sat down with solutions architects from AWS and our own team and other experts that we consulted with, and really spent the time thinking about what that network infrastructure was going to look like. And we called it building our data center in the cloud. And it really paid off in the long run to have done that. The other thing I'd add to lessons learned is be really careful about how you select the early projects that you do. So one of the challenges we have is we're not an IT organization that operates at scale like some of you might be. We don't have massive services that are, you know, handling millions of requests per hour. But what we do have is an incredible diversity of services. So if you think about a university campus, we operate our own power plant, we have a hotel, we have restaurants all over the place, we run, you know, 40 residence halls, we're home to 12,000 people. And oh, by the way, we also do all that teaching and learning and research. And it's just an incredible diversity of IT services that are necessary to support all of that. And depending upon how you count, we have somewhere between 600 and 1,000 different IT services. And those are all mostly different products offered by different vendors. And sorting through that and finding the first projects that you're going to do is really, really important. And I think the lessons we learned about that are, first, making sure that whatever you pick, you're going to succeed. That you want those first few projects to be guaranteed successes. And some of the things you can do to do that are look for things that are as straightforward as possible. So many of our services have these tight integrations with each other, and they're you know, one of the jokes we have on our team is we call some of them the tumors that kind of grow throughout your IT infrastructure and are just so tightly interwoven. Those are not the good places to start because they're not guaranteed quick wins. And then the other thing that we looked for as we were picking these early projects were services where we could also show some other kind of business value, where there was a real compelling case for bringing that service into the cloud, whether it was cost savings or resiliency or some other benefit that either end users or business leaders would see, and they would give us fodder for our talking points as we started sharing this message about our cloud strategy around campus.
Yeah, so I agree with everything, and really the advice and suggestions you've received are good suggestions, so let me give you some bad suggestions based on what we did, because we didn't really go about it the way you should, which is to, you know, start with baby steps, you know, get buy-in and so on. However, I think there's a lesson to be shared here as well. Whether you're an IT leader or you head the business, adopting cloud in general and AWS, it's about backing your instincts to a large extent. And for us, AWS is a huge part of our overall cloud strategy. We use Google Apps for email and documents still. And when we went to Google, ditching a very extensive in-house infrastructure, we were certainly the only big firm in the DC area to do so. And nobody thought it was a good idea. And same with Amazon. We actually moved critical apps from a security perspective to solve security challenges. And I think we were alone in, back then at least, in the view that this is actually the only way we could solve our security challenges with advanced persistent threat issues. And I think it's all turned out well. Certainly was a little reckless the way we went about it, but a lot of the challenges we face is not unique. Most organizations face security issues, operational issues, DevOps, and we're not the only organization in multiple geographic areas, but some are unique to the human rights and democracy space, so that factors into how we move about as well. So that's, I would say, to trust your instincts, even if it's not necessarily popular.
Hi, everybody. I think the one lesson learned that I found out is that you guys renamed everything. I don't know what everything is anymore, right? Does anybody feel that way, that they renamed everything and we don't know what it is anymore? Example of that would be like Route 53. How many people know what Route 53 is in the room here? Okay. Now, how many of you knew what Route 53 was just 2 years ago? And if I said external DNS services, how many people would know what that means, right? So things have changed, and the cheese has been moved all over the place, and we're trying to figure out where everything's at, right? And that's one thing that we're learning as we go along to our journey. We're early in our journey right now. We're doing right now backup services to the cloud. We just did Route 53. And the thing about Route 53 DNS services, we were very surprised how mature that service is. And it only took us 8 weeks to migrate from our on-prem solution to AWS Route 53. So that was something that was pretty impressive to see. But one of the things that I'm finding is that, I thought that my business leaders were going to have a real issue with security, right? We all hear about security, how concerned they were, and they were concerned about that, but we could definitely prove to them that, yeah, it is secure. We can encrypt at flight. We can encrypt at rest. We can manage the keys, right? But the biggest pushback that I got that I wasn't really counting on was on my own staff. I mean, how many people here manage staff in your teams right now? That's what I found has been the biggest challenge. This is a whole new world. Everything is renamed to something new, right? People are competent in their certain technologies, right? And now they're coming in, looking at these new services, and they're trying to figure it out, right? So before they were competent, right, in their areas, they were experts in the areas, and now it's this whole new world is happening right now. And before they could focus on one area, like I'm a storage architect. All I do is storage. Well, in this world, in the cloud world, that doesn't work anymore. You have to know about storage, you have to know about security, you have to know about networks. If you really want to be effective, you have to know about the entire stack to make it work. And I think that's a lesson learned that I've seen with the journey that we're taking on right now.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
It's a good segue, too. That wasn't planned, by the way, but the good segue. Mike, maybe you could talk about culture a little bit, and how do you deal with culture change?
Sure. That's really been a big thing for us. And, it's interesting because as I look back at the objections that people brought up and the barriers that we thought we were going to have, At first, we thought the barrier was going to be all about security and compliance and those issues. And then as we started digging into it, those quickly melted away, and we really didn't hear those concerns too much from around the campus community and our stakeholders. And then that shifted, and we thought, okay, the biggest barrier is going to be technical issues. And people started talking about latency and incompatibility and licensing and all those sorts of things. And those sort of didn't really materialize either. And what we were left with is the biggest issue, and I think we knew it was coming, but the magnitude of it took us by surprise, is the degree of that culture change that was really necessary. And I talked when we were getting started about how some of our staff had been here for a really, really long time, for 30, 40 years in a couple of cases. And we really had to help a lot of people along the way. And one of the ways we did that is with a lot of storytelling. We got out in front of people and made it very clear what we were doing and why, and told the story of the cloud as just one of the natural evolution of IT. And it is change, but we've gone through changes before. We went from a mainframe environment to a client-server environment, and from a client-server environment to a highly virtualized environment. And then this is the next step. We're going from virtualized on-premise to virtualized in the cloud. And that helped a little bit, but I think what Bob said is absolutely true, that people can't be living in one specific technical silo anymore, and that concept of a full-stack engineer is critically important. And we've done a lot of training and education around that. We have about 17 people here at reInvent this week, and we've brought similar numbers in past years. We've hosted training sessions on campus. We've had the AWS Essentials, I think we've run 7 or 8 times now. And we just do our best to make sure that everybody really has the ability to transform themselves. One of the other concerns we heard quite a bit was, I don't think I'm going to have a job once this is all done. And that's a legitimate concern. And what we've told people is you will have the ability to have a job, but your job might change. And maybe we won't need a team of dedicated storage engineers anymore, but we absolutely need people who are willing to understand the different storage services that are available and how to pull them together in the right way and be the consultants to other technical experts in different areas. So it is a time of dramatic change, but there's opportunities for everybody, and really bringing together people is one of the keys to that. So one of the other things we've done is we have a team that's dedicated to helping us make this migration, and they've been working together for a year or so now. We're rotating people on and off of that team. So we have about 25 people who are spending most of their time on cloud migration these days, representing different technical areas. They come on and they do some projects with us, and they rotate off, go back to their operational unit, and bringing those services with them to run with the experience that they gained from working together in a co-located space with other people focused on cloud. And then we can bring in new people who can gain that same level of experience, and hopefully we manage over the next few years to work our way through the entire organization and make that cultural transformation. But culture change is hard and it takes time.
Does anybody else want to talk about that? Because you all are nodding your head. And
I can give you like a real world example of this culture change. And so recently we moved our entire backup infrastructure into AWS. So we got rid of tape. We're backing up to S3 into Glacier. And we had a celebration on this about 2 weeks ago. Hey, 100% done, celebrating with the team. And in there, I brought up the point, hey, before, we have 1,500 environments that we back up. And on average, on a daily basis, we would get 72 errors on a daily basis for many different reasons, right? And now that we switched everything over to an automated solution, now we're down to 12 errors per day, which is really good for 1,500 environments. If folks here who back up systems, you know what I mean, right? So I was saying, hey, it's so great, that we automate all this stuff and our error rate's down by 84%. And then I got interrupted by one of my engineers. And my engineer said, hey, it's not because we're backing it up to the cloud that it's more efficient and the error rate's down. It's because now I have the time to go in and do advanced troubleshooting and actually taking a look at the 72 errors and getting them resolved. Before I had to spend all day trying to keep the system running. Now I can take the time to actually take a look at some of these issues that we're having today and getting them resolved. So that shows you, it's kind of like the culture change where they're used to doing something some way. Now we're using the cloud services, to automate our functionality, and whether they realize it or not, they're seeing the benefit. Now they can, getting away from that I'm going to say mundane, day-to-day stuff. Now they can go and look at the more advanced engineering functions and bring more value to the organization. So that's a real-world story. Just happened just 2 weeks ago. We had that conversation.
So, yeah, Roland.
Yeah, just one comment also from a Singapore Post perspective. When we started the e-commerce part, we started right in the cloud, right, as I mentioned earlier. But Singapore Post has still a data center. When I went to Singapore first, the CIO told me that eventually he's going to have to upgrade the data center a little bit because it was a little old. And now actually Singapore Post corporate is also migrating the data center elements over to AWS. So it kind of, saw it working for the subsidiary and see that it works successfully, and now they're migrating as well. So it's a culture shift within there too.
Yeah. Let's just, can we do I want to do about 5 more minutes, and then I'm going to start coming out to you guys here. And actually, if somebody can be checking on mics so other people can hear the question from folks. I'm not sure, we might have to just take one of these. But could maybe Eric or Vijay talk security a little bit and how you look at that?
Sure, I can start. So, especially since I'm the one with the mic.
Yeah.
Yes, and I'm not giving it away. Cool. So, kind of, I'll answer that, but flowing into the previous question as well about culture change and stuff. I'm a big believer in standards and frameworks, and I think the importance. So we at NDI try to stick to the COVID framework to marry IT with the business, and internally strive for the SANS top 20 controls, because we're a little far away from NIST. And I think that's important because if you're having conversations about, well, how do we do things in Amazon the exact same way we do it right now, it's like at some point it's an idiotic conversation. You're never going to get out of it, and it's a waste of everybody's time. But rather, if you focus on, well, what is it we're trying to do to begin with, these go a lot easier. And same with security for us. It's about, what are the standards we're trying to achieve? What is the risk profile we're trying to adhere to? And how do we, what is the least cost we could expend for maintaining an acceptable risk profile? And time out again and again, the answer is to utilize cloud technology, utilize all these wonderful Amazon services. And when everybody talks about security, most of us, our instinct is to go to integrity issues or confidentiality issues, but availability is a huge part of security. And this idea that if there are issues, you can have a support person restart an instance, or you could have scripts which look at your health and restart an instance so that your end users can achieve those 9 nines and experience 9 nines. Those are huge wins. Being able to get logs real time, correlated logs, and a lot of things which would have taken us months and years don't take as long. So I think the way we've approached security, and I'm not at all saying that we're there, and security is a game, you keep fighting and then you lose. That's what happens. But it's just to pretend that we're winning. We try to adopt a standard, and I think that's very important to have a goal. I'm an engineer myself. I see myself as a techie, and getting into these intellectual arguments about what's more secure, and all of those are a waste of time. I think we should focus on what we're trying to do, and what's the best way we can get there.
Right, I would mirror that. Everybody has a certain level of risk that they're willing to tolerate, and everybody has a certain specific set of controls. And whether it's the SANS Top 20 or some other set of controls, you've got them. And moving to the cloud doesn't magically make them all go away. There's still the set of security controls that you have. And in our case, we simply took those controls. We looked at some of the existing cloud frameworks, specifically the Cloud Security Alliance framework, and we essentially used that along with our controls, along with all of the information we got from Amazon to just validate whether or not moving there continued to meet our controls. We weren't moving to Amazon to be more secure, and we certainly weren't moving there to be less secure. We were moving there to be as secure as we felt we always needed to be, whether it was in a traditional data center or in a cloud data center. And so, sort of the key is making sure that you understand your controls and that you know the level that you want to be at. And once you understand that, you can go through some simple exercises working with a lot of data that's available to you today to become comfortable with Amazon's ability to meet that level of security. And I'm not going to lie to you, some things probably need to change on your side. Classic network security today has to change a little bit, and you might have to do some clever things with your network. Reference back to my statement about network engineering. There are other things or other controls you might have to do a little bit of work on your side. But at the end of the day, you will meet whatever that standard is that you have. And once you've met that, you're as secure as you felt you needed to be. And I think that's what's important.
So, Eric, I think that moving to the cloud in some ways gives you the opportunity.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Okay. It gives you the opportunity to be even more secure. And so one of the things that resonated with me this morning in Andy's keynote, he was talking about those different benefits and reasons that people move to the cloud. And one of them that's really important for us is letting somebody else do the heavy lifting. And when it comes to security, so I think the biggest investments we make in security are in people, right? We have some highly educated, very expensive people working for us on our security team. And they used to spend a lot of their time worrying about things like physical security of the data center, about like making sure we had enough firewall capacity and doing those sorts of things. And they don't need to do that anymore. And we still have the same size team. And now they're able to focus higher up in the stack and do things that we just weren't able to do before. So we're making the same investment and we're getting a lot more out of it.
No, I agree. You can definitely get more from it. But I don't want to leave the impression that you have to get more from it. You have to be as secure as you need to be. And Amazon absolutely can accommodate wherever that level of need is with some service or some engineering requirement.
I love both points. Matt's got the mic. Do we have anybody? Do you have anybody has a question?
We got one here, and then I'll come kind of
Yeah,
around.
we've got a few. All right.
Hi, my name is Aaron Hughes with Washington State Department of Fish and Wildlife. In fact, I believe you're a familiar face. I think I've seen Mr. Michelli around. I was wondering, with your transition to cloud-based backups, did that include historic data content? And if so, how did you go about transferring that historic revisions, those revisions of backup data, to your new solution?
Yeah, so there's two types of data that we have out there. We have our normal backup solutions where we do our daily, weekly, monthlies, and we keep it for a year, and we keep 3 days on-prem. That's a standard, scheme that we follow, right? But then we have some data that we have to keep for a very long time, right? An example would be like district court right now. District court right now, they record, they do voice recordings of all the hearings that occur, and that has to be stored for 93 years.
Approximately.
Right? Yeah. So where are we going to put that, right? So we're actually using a product that NetApp provides. It's called the Alta Vault, and we're able to archive the data straight to Glacier and keep it in Glacier for those 93 years. Hopefully, it'll last that long, right? But that's how we're doing it today. So yeah, that's a very good question. And something, one of the things that I'm seeing is that the demand for storage has not decreased. If anything, it's accelerating right now. And there's more and more ideas out there today, or more technologies that are forcing us to come up with, bigger data sets, bigger storage solutions out there today. So that's what I'm seeing right now in my shop right now. Not only district court, on the GIS side, tremendous amount of data. Department of Natural Resources, for King County, we have a plane that flies out and takes pictures of everything, and it's about 11 terabytes worth of data right now because now they're doing it with HD technology. So yeah, definitely a lot of data demands out there today, and great question. But yeah, we're using Glacier to do our deep archival.
I saw so many hands go up. I want to keep it moving. So Matt, please, next.
Hi, Weber Rastogi with Intel Capital. For those in the panel that have not moved yet everything to the cloud, could you maybe speak to what applications had to be rewritten as you were moving to the cloud? And then what is the decision making for new workloads? Is cloud just the default, or you're still doing a case-by-case analysis for new workloads?
Mike, you want to start? And then-
Sure. So let me start with the end of your question. We now have a cloud-first strategy. So what we say is for all new workloads, we first turn to the cloud. And the way we do that is, as a little further refinement of that strategy, is we actually turn first to software as a service. And that's been our strategy for quite some time, and it all kind of fit together nicely when we had this formal cloud-first strategy come out last year. But we do look to see if there's a software as a service product that meets our business needs, it's financially feasible, which is often a sticking point because sometimes it's like 10 times more expensive to go with software as a service. But the difference now is when we can't find a suitable SaaS solution, we turn to infrastructure as a service, and that's our default. And in order to deploy something in an on-premise solution, you have to build the case now. So it's gone. The burden of proof has shifted from why this should go into the cloud to why should this go on-premise. And I can tell you, in a year of doing this, nobody has successfully fought that battle for us yet.
Yeah, I think I also want to add to that is that, right now we've done a lot of TCOs on this stuff, and I haven't found something yet where we can beat actually cloud pricing, okay? If anybody here thinks that they can do it for cheaper, I would love to talk to you about that, to see if you really included all the costs involved about supporting your environments, but I haven't seen that yet.
I'm guessing this is the wrong crowd for that argument.
Yeah. But what I'm seeing right
They're
now
down the street.
Yeah, but what I'm seeing right now is that sometimes folks they want to use the on-prem techniques, right? I want the server up 24/7. I want a test environment up 24/7. Well, yeah, if you leave it up 24/7, then yeah, you're gonna have to pay for that, right? But if you only use that environment for 1 month out of the year, you can turn it off for 11 months, and you can save significantly that way. So we have to really let go of our preconceived on-premise notions and really adopt a more modern way of doing things. And really, it's not modern. It's like, like when I left to come to Vegas, I turned my lights off before I came out here, right? I'm not using the lights at home, so I turn them off. So it's the same principle. Turn off that server if you're not using it. And if you use those techniques, you'll see that it's going to be a lot more cost-effective to operate in the cloud versus on-prem.
Great, thank you. Keep going.
Okay. Hi, my name's James Anderson. We're not yet in Amazon, but I appreciate everything you've said, and dealing with people's challenges around security, etc., seems to have been quite easy, actually. There's lots of great material out there. Where we're really running into problems are the things about the cloud that are different to having your own data center, and that's things like Amazon reserving the right to change their pricing whenever they would like. And so my senior stakeholders are, well, all right, if we go into Amazon and you take these higher value services which are not portable, what are you going to do if the pricing changes? What are you going to do if Amazon removes these services? I wonder how you manage that conversation with your senior stakeholders.
I hate that part of my job. Well,
at least you're honest, yeah.
Okay. No, it's I think the question you're asking is very important and probably not unique to ROI or business case issues. But it is. I mean, we operate in we're an NGO, and we have an entire army of accountants and all kinds of people who are used to buying equipment, maintaining equipment, amortizing those costs. So, you have $1 million piece of equipment, they don't see it as $1 million, they might see it as $200,000 and so on. So there's a whole business built around a specific way of doing business. And here you actually have to, again, that's where I come back to standards. The purpose of IT is to deliver value to the organization. So, start with that, elevate the level of conversation and awareness of exactly what we're trying to achieve, and try to see this, as Bob said, in terms of staff savings, in terms of different kinds of ways Amazon lets you save costs, whether it is being more flexible with reserved instances. it's been a while now, but for a while back, you kind of had to know exactly how long you need your instances and so on. Those days are gone. So there's a lot of tools out there to make it easy. But I think if you are having a conversation with your CFO or your COO about instance costs, you've probably already lost the battle. It's about trying to build a 5-year case of how much value we can get out of doing this. And when you talk about legacy applications, please, business leaders understand what a sunk cost is. So let's talk in their terms. But yeah, I mean, that ends up being a huge part of your job, and you'll hate it.
Does anybody else want to roll into
Yeah,
it?
just one thought that's kind of related to that. The big takeaway for us from a cloud perspective was the ability to put everything into recipes, right? Kind of the infrastructure becomes kind of secondary. The important thing is you know how your infrastructure looks like, and you can put in a recipe, and let's say your environment crashes, you execute recipes and you have your infrastructure back. And that if you choose a recipe that's vendor independent, then you could actually execute that recipe with another service provider as well, if you wish, right? But I think if you follow that best practice, that you keep your environment documented in a recipe, like with Chef or Puppet, then you are pretty independent to a certain extent.
I think I wanted to add that if you talk to your business leaders about those concerns, I mean, look at the track record, right? Amazon's lowered their prices 43 times in the last 5 years. Have they ever raised it once, right? So I think they have a pretty good track record. And just recently, just 2 weeks ago, they lowered the Glacier pricing by 36%, right? To give you an idea, 36% to King County, it's about $100,000 in savings that we have achieved just by doing nothing. Just by, by betting smart. We're in Vegas, right? So you bet smart, right? And I think we just made $100,000 on that. So those are the things you take back with you, right? Look at the history, look at the trends, look what they're doing. They have a track record, okay?
Okay, let's go here, yeah.
Hello, my name is David Levine, and I wonder, in this transition phase, when you go all in the cloud, where do you put your IT management, workload automation solutions, and in which phase of the transition?
Does anybody want to? So can I also I want to make sure I understood the question too, which was, were you asking it from a personnel perspective? Like what are you doing with people in the organization, or?
No, I'm asking when you map all your applications that you have to move, right? Your on-premise applications. You have all your legacy IT management, scheduling, workload automation, products and solutions that you use. You have to move them as well if you go all in. In which phase of the project you do that?
Got it, okay, yeah. Eric looks like he's ready to.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a best practice on it, but I can certainly tell you when we did it. And we did it right up front. Getting our management environment moved over was one of the important things that we wanted to have. We wanted to make sure that, A, it worked. It vetted that we could cross both into the cloud and continue our legacy data center pretty easily. And obviously managing infrastructure, especially if you're moving to a whole new infrastructure, it's going to be very important. So for us, it was right up front, and it worked really well for us. It also gave us a chance very early to start to integrate with all of the APIs that Amazon had, and in terms of using those to try to do some more of that management and integrating them with our products. And now, we have been using Amazon for a while. Now, all of the main products actually integrate natively with Amazon, making it even easier to get those products up and running ahead of that migration of your infrastructure.
Yeah, if I understood the question correctly, if your end goal is to host the app in the cloud, then I can't think of a point where it would still make sense to manage the DevOps process in-house. Like the minute you make the decision, you have to push everything to the cloud. It'll just make the QA process easier, the production management easier, and everything.
So one thing I'd add also is that area, I talked a lot about culture change. Man, did we have a lot of tension around existing IT management processes and the move to the cloud. And we've used it as an opportunity to reinvestigate and take another look at some of those practices and things we've been doing for decades in some cases, that when you hold them up against the cloud model, don't make so much sense anymore. So what we're trying to do, and so there's the forming, storming, norming, and performing stages of teams. We're in storming on this one for sure right now. But what we're trying to do is go all the way back and say, what are the objectives we're trying to achieve with each one of these processes, and what's the best way to achieve those objectives in our new cloud environment. So that's one way to think about it also. It might not necessarily be moving a system or moving a process, but changing it and meeting an objective in a different way.
Excellent.
Hi, Sharon Godner with Computer World. At the beginning, a couple of you gave some great pieces of advice to companies that would be moving to the cloud. Could the rest of you do the same? And if you've already given some advice, would you give another piece of advice of what to do or what to watch out for?
Sure. I don't know if what I gave was great advice, but here's one. Here's another tidbit. I would certainly say that it's an opportunity to adhere to standards. So there's probably a lot of things we're all doing, which is not quite as secure as it could be. And to use the process of migration to the cloud as a blank slate for your security practices is probably the most important recommendation I'd make. If you don't take the time to do that, then you're going to carry over bad practices. So again, I just stick to standards, and if you don't have standards, pick anything that you think is something that is realistic. And just definitely don't set goals which you'll never meet, but set something realistic and try to meet those.
So I think the advice I'd offer, Vijay, is similar, but on a different theme. So you talked about security. I think that's also true for just your overall infrastructure. So one of our architects has this great phrase that I'll borrow and reuse here, but it's in this process of migrating everything, we're shining a flashlight in a lot of very dark places, and we're finding some creepy, crawly things underneath those rocks. But it's giving us a chance to do something that's really a once-in-a-career opportunity. How many times do you get to go through your entire infrastructure and reinvent the way you're working, your 1,000 different services are operating? So taking that approach of really thinking about everything you're doing, it's just a great opportunity to do that.
So the one thing I would add is watch, pay attention to your velocity of your migration. You don't have to migrate everything in a day. And Amazon has a lot of services, and it can become extremely overwhelming to try to figure out how to suddenly convert everything you're doing into some Amazon-related component. You don't have to do that, right? You can just migrate core infrastructure, one system at a time. You can just migrate a piece of your network. You can just migrate an application. It's the old, you don't eat the elephant in one big bite. And it's really true with Amazon. There's a lot of elephant there. So, you just do a little bit at a time, find those simple wins, and then just do another little bit at a time. And, that success begets more and more success. And it improves the morale of the team. It helps your sponsors realize that this is a good idea. So just a little bit at a time, and make your plan work that way.
Yeah, and then one more piece.
You're still on? Yeah. Yep, you got it, go.
Cool. So for the plan, it's important to, at the beginning, create like an inventory of what you currently have in your data center so you actually know when you migrate. Sometimes that doesn't exist in every organization, so it's important to just have an accurate inventory of your current infrastructure. And then the nice thing about AWS is it's all based on building blocks, right? So you can do this mapping. As Bob said at the beginning, they came up with a new vocabulary, right? So it's good to understand what of your current infrastructure will map to what within Amazon. And once you have that, then you come up with a plan to migrate.
Aaron, I think the last thing I would add is that you really need to change your way of thinking when you adopt these services, right? We're married to our on-prem solutions. I mean, I've been in IT for 20 years. I started out with mainframes and then server environments and now cloud infrastructure. So the gentleman talking about moving apps, into the cloud. Really take a look at what Amazon has to offer. See what tools they already have integrated in that you don't have to do anymore. Try to adopt a solution that's most cloud-friendly, if you will, than trying to make it look just the way it was on-prem. So that would be an advice I would give everybody.
Really good. Thank you for that. Go ahead, here.
I have two questions. First is about the choice of a partner. Can you comment on how you've decided to partner with Amazon versus some of the competition? My second question is related to something that was discussed earlier about finding the right set of use cases, ones that are simple and that will allow you to achieve some benefits. We've been looking for the right use cases. We've identified a few where we could really benefit from the elasticity of the cloud. Our challenge is, which I'm sure is the challenge of many people here, we have a lot of interdependencies between our apps and our systems. And we also have, in many cases, co-location requirements between the applications and our data. And it's impossible, it's difficult, perhaps impossible to move everything. How do you recommend that we'll go about finding those, solving that problem? Right? Latency was discussed before. And having dedicated lines will help, but will not eliminate the problem completely. How do we think about that?
There was like 5 questions there.
Okay, he asked, the first one he asked was, how'd you pick AWS as a provider? And then the second one is, I've got these examples and how do they...
I'll take that first one because it's the easy one. And
then Vijay wants to do the same. Okay, go ahead. And Eric wants to jump in.
So we went through an RFP process and we compared providers, and we had 5 of the major vendors compete, right? And at the end, we had 2 finalists, 2 of the largest cloud service providers in the industry in King County, right? And at the end of the day, when you look at maturity and feature set, I mean, it was by far, I mean, it wasn't even a contest, you know. One provider could support 12 operating systems, right? Another provider could support 1 operating system. So which one would you go with, you know? So that's why at the end of the day, it was, and let's not even talk about cost, right? At the end of the day, it was lower cost, better functionality, and could support our environments, and that's why we went with the solution.
Yeah, so when we moved, probably it's fair to say there wasn't much competition for what we were trying to do. So I'm sure today you have more choices. So RFP, making sure that you have proper goals, cost obviously is one of them, security, ease of use, and so on. So that's how I would go about it. But I am very interested in the question you asked about latency and apps that need to communicate with each other and so on. We were at one point so besieged by hacking from powerful state actors that we gave up on domain controllers on site. So everybody who came to our office was logging onto domain controllers hosted in Amazon, and we didn't even have direct connect back then. They were basically going over the internet. So it's not, you will face problems. I think it comes down to software architecture, hardware architecture, and so on. We still have apps where you're inside the office. For some, you go through the VPN, direct connect, and hit the boxes on the VPC. If you're outside, you hit the load balancers and so on. Some of our architecture is based on security challenges, like just because a box is behind CloudFront or Cloudflare or whatever doesn't mean an attacker can't still get your ELB's machine name or your IP and try to hit you directly. So it's going to evolve, but I'll say this, Route 53 is a huge part of the solution so that your machines can more easily talk to each other. And having a good plan on which machines are only accessible for your engineers and sysadmins and which machines is accessible to the public is very important before you set your VPC architecture in place and so on. So I think it all boils down to the requirements and having a plan to meet those requirements. One thing I will say though is you don't have to be a network expert to be able to architect a very solid architecture with AWS. Security groups, routing tables, they're all fairly easy to use and has very good documentation around it.
So in terms of the how do you move
You got it?
not working on?
I'll worry about that later. So much like the microphone, in terms of how do you sort of structure the move complexity that you're describing, for anybody that's had to actually move real data centers, it's very similar, right? There's that weekend where you shut off those boxes and a whole group of people grab those machines, throw them in the back of a truck after they've unracked them, race them down the road, throw them in new racks. It's really not any different. Yeah, try not to break anything. Oh, geez, Bob dropped his coffee on it. Now we're in a big trouble. It's really not any different. When we did it, I think one of our biggest moves in one weekend was probably 50 or so systems. And you group them. Because latency can definitely be a problem, especially if you have apps that talk in little tiny transactions, right? That's when it really starts to hurt. Those apps, you want to bundle them up. You want to figure out where that heavy traffic, where that heavy chatter is. They're going to move together, and you coordinate that move together. And it's a bit of a pain because sometimes you get it wrong, and there's that one you forgot, and your users call you in the morning, and they say, "Oh, but what about this reporting app?" And you don't realize that's connected. Not that I'm speaking from experience. And you very quickly work with your team to migrate that app, that evening or that night. The big difference, though, is instead of having to unrack, pack, ship, right? Instead of having to do that, you're doing it all virtually. When it moves over, you're fairly confident it's there. The fact of the matter is you can move a lot of it there long before you even turn it up. And the only thing at the end of the day you have to move is your data to make sure your data is there. That's a lot easier than having to move big systems. So it's just coordinating those clusters of machines. And the time you spent doing that is well worth it.
Great. All right, we've got time for one more question. I've only got 3 minutes to get you out on time, so you're the lucky one.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. So I'm Russ Vanderpool. I'm from Mass Mutual, 160 years old company, so it's good company here. Thanks. My question is, this goes back to the culture, and I'm wondering if I can dig a little deeper into the culture part. And so I really appreciated earlier when you talked about the 25-team person and rotating people in and out, try to socialize that throughout the company. My question is, to me that requires top-down leadership communication to push that focus, to push that emphasis. Was that originated from the CEO or from the president of the college down? Was there communication up to the top? Because I'm in the weeds. I'm actually helping set up AWS, and I really need that kind of top-down push from the top to get that cultural change. I wonder what your input is.
You also talk about the card in that, too.
Yes, okay. So absolutely, it does require top-down, but it also requires bottom-up. I think we had a combination of different factors that have helped us do that. So it hasn't come from the president of the university. In an environment like ours, IT is a little bit of an island, but and the effects of this are mostly within the central IT organization. But our CIO and me and the rest of our senior leadership team talked about the message and the culture change constantly. And we had many different ways that we communicated about it. We have a blog, we tweet, we talk at all staff meetings. We have, Frank was referring to an infographic that we put out that we plastered all over the place talking about the reasons for what we're doing. And then I think the other side of that is that staff needs to be really deeply invested in the change, and because people don't always want to hear from the CIO or the senior director of this or that. They want to hear from the technical people that they trust. So having our architects and our engineers go out there and get experience with these tools, you can't go and work with this technology and not come back excited and bubbling over with enthusiasm. And I think that's one of the most powerful things for us in the culture change.
So we got 1 minute. Anybody want to add anything to that point? Everybody's good? All right, well, you guys have been great. You are awesome, and we really appreciate you taking the time. And thank you. Thanks for coming.